everyone. So, this was supposed to be the Black Panther episode where we talked about the greatness that was the movie that I have seen twice and plan to see 2 more times. But I've had some technical issues, so even though I had a great show planned, it didn't quite work out, so you'll likely hear that next week. This week, though, I am speaking to the keeper of my family history, our family historian, my sister, and we're talking about her 10-year search for our own Wakanda, our family history, and finding our own African roots. This episode is longer than usual, but there's an exciting reveal at the end, so stay tuned. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm actually really excited that you're here. This was never like in the realm of possibilities, us two doing a podcast together, so it's kind of cool.
Why?
I don't know. I didn't ever envision you as like part of this podcasting world, but I'm really glad you're here.
I don't know whether or not to be offended or to be okay with that.
Anyway, I'm glad you're here, and I'm really, I'm looking forward to having this discussion about our family history.
Mm-hmm.
So you've kind of taken on this role as our family archivist, and you have been like digging and researching and like pulling all-nighters, obsessing over our family history and trying to find out who our people are and like where we come from.
Yeah, because nobody else in the family seems motivated enough to do it. Well, I wish that you would do it so that I wouldn't be up all night doing this research.
I'm interested in this stuff, and I want someone to do it for me. Like I feel like I
do.
I want them to have. I want
You want
what's
to benefit.
That show called? No, what are those shows called? The ones there's like Who Do You Think You Are, and then there's my favorite one with Dr. Lewis Gates, Finding Your Roots. Mm-hmm. I want them to have like an open call where they just do regular people, and I want to go, and I want them to do it for me. That's what I want.
They didn't have an open call, but they had like a Facebook Live session, and I submitted questions, and they didn't pick my questions.
Yeah, see. Anyway, so I just want to say, I'm really appreciative that you're doing this. And one of the things I wanted to talk about on the podcast was really, I think it's, for me anyway, yeah, this is important to me, but it's a lot of work. And it's really sad that for a lot of us, like, we don't know our history, Like, we don't know beyond, I know my grandparents, right? Our grandparents. Yeah. And we kind of have an idea on like daddy's side, like who the great grandparents are. Cause I think her name was Ursi. Like she lived so long, right? Like she was like 103 or something. So we know her, 98. But no, she was not. She was in her hundreds. Trust me. I remember. Really? Yeah. I'm older than you, man. I know. So she was like over 100. And so we know her, but like, that's it. Right? Like, that's it. That's our connection. That's it. And it's on both sides. Like, we have no idea. And I think one of the other things is it's not only that we don't know, it's that there's this unwillingness of that older generation to kind of talk about the past, which is sometimes really frustrating.
I feel like that's changing now, though. And
yeah, because you keep peppering people with questions.
Yeah, but they're more willing to discuss it. And I also feel like we grew up in a culture where there is this curiosity that didn't exist with our parents or didn't exist or maybe it's because we grew up so far away from family that we had all these questions, whereas our parents or some of our cousins who grew up in Barbados, they're around family all the time, so they don't have that kind of natural curiosity.
They have that. They know where they're from. That's all that matters to them, right? We Bajan, that's it, right? Yeah. I think we need to start by maybe just taking it back a few steps and just grounding people in who we are. So our family is from Barbados, as far as we know. This is what our family history, Barbados on my mom's side, Barbados on my dad's side. and that's it. Like, that's what we know. But
Mm-hmm.
there's been this kind of longing to really know who we are, right? And what our story is. And so my sister, Maria, who we're talking to right now, she's done a ton of research, and she's even done a DNA test, which we're going to get into a little bit later. But yeah, I guess I want to know, what have you, like, okay, so you started 5 years ago. What kind of drove you to this? Like, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but what was that motivation for you to do all this? Because you've done a lot of work.
I think originally I first just wanted to build our family tree. I wanted to understand who the missing links were and why those links were missing and why it seemed that nobody in the family could answer really simple questions like, what's our great grandfather's name, or what's our great grandmother's name, or when was she born, and where exactly in Barbados was she from? Just really simple questions that didn't, I just couldn't understand why why they couldn't be answered. And at the time, Ancestry as a website was relatively new, and you said five years, but it's been significantly longer than that.
So how many years has it been?
Gosh, I don't know. Probably I started looking when I was like at Western, like university. It's been a while. It's been at least like eight,
So that's
9
like 10
years
years.
plus. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, so at the time, Ancestry as a website was quite new, and this idea of researching your ancestry was also quite new. And for Caribbean people, and for our family in particular, there were no records online. If you went on to Ancestry, you could find records for Americans, you could find records for the UK. Slowly they added records for Canada, but you most definitely couldn't find anything about Barbados. So I was frustrated, and I started building out the family tree as best I could without the resources. And then slowly over the years, the archive started to include Barbados birth certificates and death records and marriage certificates and wills and things like that. And I continued to add to our tree, but there were still gaps, and there was still, for every Afro American, and I'd say like Pan American is in North, Central, and South American, you eventually hit that brick wall where you can't, there's
You can't
nothing,
go
like
any
there's just
further.
nothing else for you to find.
Yeah.
So I
And I
decided
think,
to do
like,
a DNA test.
yeah, and I mean, one of the things I hear when we talk about stuff like this, people will say things like, well, no one really knows their family, and, my family went through a war, and we don't know who our great grandparents are. And so I want to address the difference, I think, in what we're saying. So I think the difference is, this is not a situation where you may have had records and they've been destroyed by war, or some sort of, like, I don't know, systematic something,
Removal.
happening. Yeah, like a
Mm-hmm.
systematic removal of your history or whatever. That's not what we're talking about. This is the fact that
It's just, there's absolutely no accounting for like an entire group of, an
and the
entire
reason is,
population.
yeah, and the reason there's no accounting for an entire group of people, let's just say, for Black people in the West, is because we weren't people, we weren't human, right? So our history, we were property. Our history didn't matter. Our stories didn't matter. And I think one of the things, like, when you were going through with me what you found, I think for me, I find it really emotional, and that I can't really do it. I find it really emotional, and that's, I think, part of the reason why I stopped. Because even when you were telling me, and I want to talk about some of the stories, like, that you found, like looking through the names of people, looking at babies who died, or the situation surrounding someone's death. And I mean, that stuff just gets in my soul, and it's so sad. And so I
I
think
feel
that's
like
what.
for me, I've been researching it for such a long time that I almost feel like removed from it being my history. Like it feels othered. So I
Yeah,
don't
and
have that same kind of emotional response.
yeah, and I feel like that's why I don't like talking about it with you sometimes, because even yesterday you were telling me something and it was so clinical. But I was like,
Mm.
oh my God, that's so sad. He went where? Like, what happened? But you were just so clinical about it, which is really interesting. But I want to talk about some of those stories that you found. So if we break down our family, let's start with our mom's side, okay? So when you were
Hmm.
doing your research, what were some of the stories that you found that just kind of intrigued you or bothered you a little bit, or just like what were some of the stories that you found really interesting?
So I found a website. I think it's called CaribbeanFamilyHistory.com, and it had a lot of burial records on this website. So I was able to, like using our last name and our address, like where I know our family lived or resided. I was able to find burial records for quite a few of our ancestors, as well as a lot of records for ancestors that we wouldn't have known about or didn't really make the family tree, particularly young babies,
Mm.
because obviously infant mortality rates have improved over the years, but back in the day it was a reality for many women, right? Stillbirths or deaths of young infants at a really young age, and there were quite a few that I had found,
That's one of the things
and
that I
that
think
was
bothered me when you were recounting
yeah,
it
that
to
was
me.
really
You'd mentioned there
difficult.
were so many, right? Like there were lots of babies that didn't live, that didn't survive.
Yeah. And even just like Mama, our grandmother, we know quite a few of her
Hmm.
kids that didn't
Hmm.
live past a certain age. And I guess like it's reality for so many people and so many families. But yeah, that was difficult. And
But one of the
also,
stories you found though was like, wasn't there when a mom or one of our ancestors who had lost a baby and then had suffered like a mental break or something like that? Do you remember that?
no, I feel like you just made that up.
Okay.
But no, you
No,
completely
there was someone
constructed
that
that
you said.
narrative. What I'd
No, I didn't.
found,
There was someone that you
just
said she was in a mental hospital.
yes, and I didn't say she was in there because she lost a kid. So what I also found, and what's really interesting about family history, no, Caribbean, the website that I just mentioned, is that they show you the profession or the job that the person had prior to their death.
Hmm.
It shows you their abode, like where they lived, as I mentioned before, and it also shows you not where they died, but where they were living. So whether it be at an almshouse if they were poverty stricken at the time, whether
Hmm.
it would whether it was in a well, it was listed I think as a mental institution, or things like
We have
that, which
quite
is
a
quite
few family
interesting.
members who ended up there, right?
Yeah, I mean, like it says a lot, I think.
Which is
And I think
funny,
that's
but
some,
it's not.
it's not funny. I think it's
Yeah, you're
interesting
right.
and
It's
quite
not.
serious because it, it shows that, mental health, wasn't really something that was dealt with effectively or properly back then. And it could also, these are things that could potentially show up in our own genetics. So
Yes,
I don't know what
yes, you're
that
right.
says, but yeah, no, there were a lot of really interesting things that I discovered. But as far as stories, like it's really difficult to answer that question because it's hard to contextualize a lot of the things that you find, you might find burial records, but you can't use those burial records to build out an entire narrative for that ancestor. It's not like we have newspaper articles or other things to kind of to put their life, whether it be the beginning of their life or the end of their life, into context.
Mm.
So it just takes a
I
lot
only,
of a lot of time to research all of that.
That's always so sad, right? Like I always remember being in school and hearing, I always used to get anxious around Remembrance Day because like kids would come in with pictures of their great grandparents or whoever, and they're like, they served in the war, and I remember I'd go home and I'd ask our parents, did we have anyone who served in the war? Like, did we? And they didn't. They could never. Well, they could never answer, and they didn't know, and partly, I mean, it was they couldn't answer that. They didn't know, right? Mm. But so I always feel like it's sad that we don't have those stories. Like the stories are what you it's what lives on in your family. Yeah.
But it's feel just like the records that are kept are so
poor.
Yeah, like it's just not enough. And a lot of the time the people that are keeping the records are illiterate themselves. Mm. So, like you have, like just for our mother's last name alone, like I found so many variations of the spelling, even though they're all from the same family, all living in the same home, but the last names were spelt so differently just based on whoever was recording it at the time, because they weren't sure how to spell it, or maybe the person providing their information didn't know how to spell it themselves, and just things like that. So there's so many gaps and so many hurdles that you have to navigate before you can even start constructing some form of narrative.
What was it like, I guess? What was it like staring at the birth and death records and then like coming to that realization that the challenge that our ancestors kind of lived through, the challenges that they had to deal with? Like, what was it like for you? Because I know you'd come across an instance where like you saw that they were living as slaves, right? Like you found that. So what was that like?
I think that was difficult. Like, it's weird. I think for the majority of African American, and I'm using that generally, like I said, like North, Central, South American
people of African ancestry.
Thank you. people of African ancestry. I think for most people of African ancestry, we all know that we have slave roots.
Do we know?
For the most part.
Because there are like people who are genuinely shocked when they find out, which is always hilarious to me.
I don't understand that. I mean, obviously, like, there's definitely some people whose family, who just descend from free people. Yeah. But it's rare. Like, it's not rare, like it's not the story for all of us. But, like, I expected that, and it was just a matter of like, how far can I go back until I can find it?
Far. Isn't that what?
And it wasn't.
That's what I found. It wasn't that far. So it's not that far removed from us.
For like on our father's side, it was a lot easier to do this research. On our mother's side, it was significantly more difficult because the year that our grandparents were born, those records just are not online. They're not available yet. So on our dad's side,
let's keep with the mom's side. So what did you find there in terms of how far back, like where did you find the slave ancestors?
I found that on daddy's side.
Oh, I thought you found it on the other side.
No, no, on mommy's side, I can't find past our grandmother.
Oh my God. Can you?
For mommy, I can't find past our grandmother. I found our grandfather and his father, but that was it.
So
then on mommy's dad's side, yeah, that's on mommy's maternal side. On mommy's paternal side, I went back a little bit, like I want to say great grandfather, but I couldn't really find a whole lot. And also, something that I think is not talked about a lot is just the fact that there's a lot of children that are born out of wedlock, or children that don't have fathers, or who's taking
the mom's last name.
Yeah. So it's just,
which happens a lot in the Caribbean, but I think we need to contextualize that, because there's always a danger for people to like people latch on to that and they're like, oh, that's the narrative of Black people. You know, they have kids out of wedlock and they don't get married. But we need to look at that in the bigger picture. And the bigger picture
definitely.
is, you know, the roots of slavery,
The roots of why
where you weren't allowed to get
happened.
married,
Yeah.
right? You were not allowed to get married. Men were encouraged to breed like stallions with women because it meant more. It meant that the women would reproduce, and then the slave owners would have more property, basically. So there's a history there that's been formed and that's carried on, and that's what that is. It's not that there's something inherently different about Black people that says that they don't want to be in relationships or they're not able to
definitely.
form families. That's not what that is, right? There's
it's the history, and the result of that is fractured families, generations of fractured families.
Generations.
But anyway, so as a result, that's also what kind of presents a challenge when we're doing our research.
So on our
mommy's side is really difficult.
And you said you could not get past our grandmother?
I couldn't get past, like, I know her name. We don't know when she was, actually, no, I know when she was born because I found her burial record. So I know her age. But I can't find her in any other record because the date of her birth, those records are not available online for the Caribbean yet. That's the only reason. So I'd have to physically go to Barbados and try and find something in the church records, maybe.
So that's kind of a dead end. But on our dad's side, you found a lot of information.
Yeah, on our dad's side, the family tree is really quite extensive. So Granny, her family tree was done by other members of the family, so I didn't even really have to do anything for that, which is great.
Do you have that?
Yeah, I have it, and a couple of our cousins do. But then on our dad's paternal side, our grandfather, I spent quite a lot of time researching his family history, and I made a lot of headway. So I was able to trace our 3 times great grandfather, and then literally yesterday discovered that he was in the 1st West Indian Regiment, Royal Navy, and his place of birth said Africa.
So you found our unicorn. You found our unicorn.
Yeah.
You found our African ancestor who was stolen from Africa and brought to
I don't
Barbados.
know yet. I'm trying to still figure this out because I don't know if he so it says Africa. It doesn't say what country he was originally from, although it does say that he was stationed in Sierra Leone, Bahamas, and Barbados. And I don't know if he... I don't know.
This isn't
I don't know.
So what year is this? We're talking 18...
This is 18... He served for 16 years, and this was between 1830-something and...
So there was still slavery.
It was around 1830 or 1840.
Right. So wasn't there still slavery at that time in the
Well, it was
Caribbean,
abolished in
the
1836, I believe. In the 1830s.
Okay, and that's when he joined Navy.
He joined a little bit after that. So
okay.
So what I don't know is if
he
joined. I'm not sure.
So it was abolished
I'm not sure when he joined. So I'm not sure when he joined. What I know is just his age when he did certain tours.
Mm-hmm.
So he was 34 when he was stationed in Sierra Leone, and then he was stationed in Bahamas for 3 months, and then in Barbados for something or the other. So what I'm not sure about is if he was born in Africa and was recruited to join the Navy there, or if he was enslaved and then after slavery joined the Navy. I don't know. But what I am quite sure about is that that was likely how he got the money to purchase the land, which created the
Still in our
will
family.
that we
Mm-hmm.
have, that we still have
Mm-hmm.
in our family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
So, and
interesting.
I do actually, I need to go to Barbados so I can see that will, because I think the will holds the key, because from all accounts, everyone says that the will is incredibly detailed, and very well done for a will of that time. And it
Mm-hmm.
has basically every single person in our family listed
Oh my
on that
God.
will. And the most interesting thing is at the bottom of it, he signed his name with an X. So
Mm.
it seems like he probably couldn't read or write.
Which is also
But
another reason why you would assume that he would be a slave, right?
yeah, definitely. But yeah, I'm not. I this only happened yesterday, so I still have a lot of research to do to find more information about him. But he seems quite interesting.
So he would have been like one of the last, he would have been quite young when he was taken from Africa.
Yeah.
And he would have been one of the last Africans to have been brought over to the Caribbean.
Yeah, but see, this is what I'm trying to figure out, though, is I'm trying to figure out if he was taken, brought to the Caribbean, was in the Caribbean, and then joined the army after slavery was abolished, or if he was in Africa, because obviously, colonization happened and existed
Oh, I see
uh,
what you're
in
saying.
Africa as well. Like
Mm.
if he was recruited for the army when they were looking to establish,
Oh, I see.
when they were
Yeah.
looking to grow their presence internationally, if he was recruited from Africa and then ended up in Barbados after all of his tours. Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
That's interesting. So that
Because
would actually
also,
mean,
like when I did the ancestry DNA, the results, I had a
well,
really,
let's hold that
yeah.
for a second.
Oh,
So
okay. Sorry.
that would mean that so if he was recruited, let's say he was born in Africa and he's living his life with his family in Africa, and the British are there and they're colonizing everything and stealing everything that they can get their hands on. And so they're there and they're recruiting for their navy. Because what would have been
He's
going on
seeing an
around that
opportunity
time?
to,
Was it but were they at war with the States? That was like 1812, right? That war?
yeah, no, it wasn't, he
Yeah,
was born in
no.
1822.
Okay.
He was
So
born in
anyway, they
1822 when slavery was abolished. He was about 12 years old.
when he was
And
12 when
he joined,
slavery was abolished.
yeah, I think he joined the army probably in his teens, like, well, probably
Right.
when he was 18 or 19.
Right. So we just don't know
And
if
then he
he
served for
was
16 years.
right. So what's interesting is there are two things. He could either have been a slave in Barbados and then
Mm-hmm.
slavery was abolished, he grew up a little bit and then joined the Navy, or he was recruited by colonial soldiers in
Mm-hmm.
who were in Africa at the time to join the Navy and then ended up in Barbados. So at least on that side of the family, there's a possibility that line of ancestry anyway they weren't slaves, which is interesting.
Yeah,
But we don't know.
we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, but so let's follow that thread to the African, the link to the motherland. And I think, I guess one of the things for me, like whenever I remember walking on the street and some woman came up to me and she's like, you look like you were from my country. And she was telling me like I looked like she was from her country. And she was from, I can't remember where she was from in Africa, but she thought I was like one of her like sisters from her country.
You probably
And
were.
I probably could have been, but it's like the same thing with like some of my husband's family, right? Like they'll be like, "Oh, you look Nigerian," like So I think for us, like I mean, a lot of most Black people, right, who are living in the States, you don't think about that. You don't know what that connection is. You don't know. You don't know where you're from, right? Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
know really where your roots are, and I saw this YouTube video. I think I sent it to you of this young girl who
I
is
sent it to you.
African. She's from Africa. So she's from Africa. No, her family's like from Nigeria or something like that. and she's American. She's living in America, and she got contacted by this African American woman who said, "I think we're related," and they're not even. It's not even like it's a pretty like it's a pretty close relation. And basically, essentially, what is this? They're related because this somewhere along the line, the African Americans' family or ancestors were taken from Africa and brought to America, and this is her African cousin, like her real African cousin. That is crazy, you know. And we have that kind of missing link, and I do want to take a DNA test. I do at some point, but you've done it. So what did you find?
I did it because I was trying to build out our family tree. I kept hitting this brick wall where I couldn't trace our ancestry back far enough that like back outside of the Americas, right? We all know that we were brought to the Americas, but where are we originally from? You know, Africa is a ginormous continent. I know that we're obviously from like sub-Saharan Africa, but where exactly and how did we end up in Barbados? Yeah, so
and
that
what did
was
you find out
my
when
main
you
motivation.
took it?
And also, sorry for cutting you off, but also another one of my motivations was also because certain platforms or certain ancestry tests connect you with other family members, right? Like it will tell you, okay, this person is a 90% match and you have like 90% of similar genetics basically, and it's a strong likelihood that this person is like your second cousin, and
Which
you can connect with
out,
them
right?
and figure out.
Which
well,
happened.
there's so many. Oh yeah, well that did it happened with cousins that we know,
Cousins that we know, but we didn't know they were looking into into the family history too. Like they're also looking into it, and they're living in another country, and they're doing the same research.
Yeah, but it also connects you with people that you don't know, and gives you the opportunity to reach out to them and try and make those connections for yourself and fill in those gaps. Yeah. So for like, what did you want to know? The ethnicity breakdown?
Yeah. Like, what'd you find out? Like, what results did you get back?
I thought the results were really, really interesting because, so my highest estimate or my highest percentage for a specific region was for Benin, Togo, and the percentage was 45%, which is, it's insane that such a high percentage could be from one country, specifically because for most Americans with African ancestry, the admixtures are quite diverse. You know, there's like an X amount from Benin, Togo, X amount from Nigeria, X amount from Ghana, X amount from Mali, X amount from all of these different sub-Saharan African countries. Whereas for us, or for me anyway, like 45% is from Benin, Togo, which means really that we probably have like one grandparent or great grandparent, potentially, who knows, this John Isaac, or our grandfather, or three times great grandfather, who is from this region. So that I thought was really cool. But yeah, so there's 45% Benin, Togo, 23% from Ivory Coast, Ghana, 7% from Finland, Northwest Russia, 6% from Nigeria, 5%.
There's more Russian than Nigerian.
Yeah, well, Finnish or Russian, I don't know. 5% from Africa, Southeastern Bantu, 3% Ireland, 3% Mali, 2% Senegal, 2% Great Britain, and then there's Mali, yeah. And then there's like they're like trace regions, so 1% Africa South Central hunter-gatherers, 1%.
Okay.
1% Iberian Peninsula, 1% European Jewish, 1% Africa North, and 1% Europe East was the breakdown. So, like, none of it was surprising. Maybe the Finland, Northwest Russia, I thought that would maybe be Irish or Scottish, just given Barbados' history. So that's really random, and I don't know where that's from. But what I
I
found
always felt like
most
there was a,
fascinating was
yeah, good.
what I found most fascinating was just the 45% from Benin Togo. Like
So we know we have
I've
a
been watching a
strong
lot
link
of,
to Benin
we have a
Togo
very strong link, and we probably have one or two ancestors that are like just 100%
from
from
Benin
there,
Togo.
which is
I
really
feel like
cool.
I feel like I need to take a trip. I want to go. I need to go be with my people in Benin Togo. So like
Well,
that's
I
where I need
want
to
you to
go.
do your ancestry because it's not going to
I
be
don't know why I'm
100% the
so
same.
hesitant. There's just something inside me that is just not. I don't know why I'm so hesitant to do it. I really don't know. I think it's because I listened to this program. I think I was listening to 48 Hours about how they keep your DNA and like you don't know what they're going to do with it. And I just feel like, do I want to hand my
They're not
DNA over
supposed
to
to. They only
someone
keep it if you allow them to, or if you want to contribute to their database. Otherwise, they destroy it.
I hope so. That's what you hope. You just hope they destroy it, but you never know. Anyway, I think, yeah, that's really interesting. And I do feel like we need to take a trip to Benin Togo. But yeah, I will take mine at some point and then we can compare. And maybe mine will fill in some of the gaps that yours, that we're missing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting.
So, what did you come out of this? I mean, the experience for you is still ongoing. You're still searching, you're still doing research, and you need to take trips to like Barbados and to actually go through the archives. But so far, what have
hmm
you, what have you gotten out of this? Like, um, what conclusions have you come to, and what have you kind of, where are you at right now with this?
Well, I've learned that tracing your roots is not as easy as it is on TV and neatly packaged in one, 30-minute TV show. Um, I, I don't know. Like you said, it's still ongoing. It's probably going to be a lifelong, a lifelong process, and I know, and I've accepted that there will be some things that I just can't answer, or some things that will go unsolved, unfortunately, and it's given me a stronger desire to record my own oral history and the
Mm,
people in my life that are living and that I want to preserve their histories for future
mm-hmm,
generations. I think that's become a little bit more important to me. And also just uh, like you said, like I want to travel, I want to visit these places where like literally half of me is from, like 45%, that's like half of me. It's
yeah.
just outrageous.
I feel like that will be
Um
such an emotional journey. Like I really feel
mhm.
like it'd be so special, you know?
Yeah. I'd like to travel and visit these places, and I I think that although you are hesitant to do it, I really encourage people, Black people, to research their ancestry and to do their DNA, because it's like it closes this kind of searching or this longing to know exactly where you're from. And I know that these results are not 100%.
Hmm.
I know that they can really only compare my genetics to the population groups that they have, and that already exist in their database. I get that, but it allows me to look at a map and point and say, like, I'm from here. I
Isn't it
can say with
crazy? Oh my
certainty,
God.
I'm from this region, I'm from this area, and these are my people.
We
Um,
always talk about, our kids and Black kids and the struggles that Black children have. And I really think that a part of that is just grounding them in their sense of self. Like one of the things my husband does, which I find really interesting because we never did it, but he does it. He'll say to our son and our daughter, like, he'll say, "What's your name?" And they have to say their name. And then he'll say, um, what's mommy's name? And they have to say my name, and then they'll say his name, and then he'll tell them, you are the son of, so-and-so, you are the daughter of so-and-so, you are the grandfather. And I find that so interesting, and that they, like, that's something that
history.
It's oral history, and it grounds them, right? It centers them in who they are. And I feel, and he does that, but that's from his history, which is African, right? Like, he's Nigerian. That's where that comes from. We never did that. We don't even know our great grandmother's name, right? But I feel like you're right. Like, doing that and being able to open a map and point to a map and say, I'm from here. That sounds so small for most people. It sounds so tiny. Like, oh, that's such a small thing. But that centers your soul and centers who you are in a way that gives you a sense of self and a sense of pride that carries you through life. And when you're missing that, there's a bit of dysfunction, and yeah.
I also think that what the ancestry DNA journey has kind of taught a lot of people is that our ancestry and our history is so linked. It doesn't matter, like, it's really just admixtures that are a little bit different, but everything else is the same. Like, the fragmentation of our ethnicity, like, across Africa and Europe is the same, no matter if you're from the Caribbean or if you're from parts of Brazil or Colombia or Puerto Rico or, America or Mexico. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just the admixtures that change. You know what I mean? Regardless of if you are from America, Central America, South America, I'm talking about Black people, Afro-American, Afro-Latina, X, whatever. Our ancestry, our ethnicities are pretty much similar. It's just the percentages that are a little bit different depending on where you were.
That's because we all come from the same place, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
And I think that's been really eye-opening, and it's especially when you talk about, like, the Latinx experience and this kind of ownership of being Afro-Latina or Afro-Latino or whatever, like,
that's new.
It's new, exactly. And it's this understanding now, seeing, like, I'm 40% African. Like, you can't deny that. But it's kind of
sad that you need DNA to tell you that. Like, if you know your history,
100%.
if you know history, then it's not surprising that people from Dominican or Cuba or Puerto Rico,
but you have to also look at
Colombia, even, have African ancestry or are Afro whatever. Of course they are, right?
Yes, but you have to look at the history of those countries and why it is that those parts of them are denied and things like that. But anyway, I think it's kind of revealing for a lot of people, and I think it's quite positive.
Yeah.
And I think you should do your DNA.
I'm going to do my DNA. I'll do it. I will do it. I'm glad you've done it. And I just want to end this conversation by saying thank you, sister, for kind of committing, like, wholeheartedly to this family search, to find who our people are and our ancestors. I think it'll be great for our kids one day to be able to have this to kind of pull from. So thanks.
Welcome.
If you enjoy listening to the show, be sure to subscribe so you get automatic updates of new episodes every Tuesday. Don't forget to follow Woke Mommy Chatter on Twitter at Woke Mommy, on Instagram, and follow along on Facebook at Woke Mommy Chatter. If you'd like to get in touch, have feedback, ideas for the show, drop me a line at wokemommychatter@gmail.com.